Hi, welcome to this lesson on protests, a preparation for Paper 2, Question 5, the writing question. There have been protests against the new Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill, which has raised concerns. So the lesson is on persuasive writing. The starter activity is to find other words for the word protest. Here are some alternatives to the word protest: challenge, demonstration, dissent, objection, outcry, question, revolt, riot, turmoil, clamour, declaration, difficulty, grievance, march, protestation, rally, remonstrance, remonstration, tumult. They don't necessarily just mean protest, but they're associated with it. Here are the lesson objectives for today: to discuss what protests mean for our liberty and democracy in the UK, to discuss the benefits and drawbacks of the new government bill to limit some aspects of protests, to revise 10 aspects of a good piece of persuasive writing, and to plan a piece of writing on learners' views of protests.
Historically, protests have led to improved protection of human rights and continue to help define and protect civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights in all parts of the world. They enable individuals and groups to express dissent and grievances, to share views and opinions, to expose flaws in governance, and to publicly demand that the authorities or non-state actors rectify problems and are accountable for their actions. The right to protest involves the exercise of numerous human rights and can be essential for securing all human rights. Protests also play an important part in the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural life of all societies. Yet, governments around the world too often treat protests as either an inconvenience to be controlled or a threat to be extinguished. In reality, protests encourage the development of an engaged and informed population and enable the direct participation of people in public affairs that affect them.
This year has offered us quite a variety of protests and responses from around the world. Starting on the 6th of January, the gathering of Trump supporters turned into a violent mob attacking the Capitol, where American lawmakers were approving the votes for Biden's presidency. On the 1st of February, the military coup took place in Myanmar, also known as Burma, followed by weeks of continuing protests and much bloodshed. More recently, the vigil for Sarah Everard on Clapham Common was forcefully broken up as it contravened coronavirus regulations. 2020's Black Lives Matter protests were a global response to racism. History shows us that protests are nothing new. See, the people are revolting. Here is a selection of videos from different protests which have happened recently. We have Black Lives Matter, the Sarah Everard killing protests, the January 6th invasion of the Capitol, protests against the killing of Daunte Wright at a traffic stop, and Adam Toledo, who was 13 years old, shot by police, and a British movement to abolish the police. Don't forget our British values, which are democracy, law, liberty, respect, and tolerance. Which of these do you think gives us the right to protest? What is the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Bill? The government says the bill, introduced in the Commons earlier in 2021, will give police powers to protect themselves and the public, introduce tougher sentencing, and improve the efficiency of the court and tribunal system. What does the bill say about protests? The police will be able to impose conditions such as start and finish times on static protests, powers which officers already have in relation to marches. Additionally, senior officers will be able to impose maximum noise limits on protest, with powers to intervene when the noise is disrupting the activities of an organisation or has a relevant impact on persons in the vicinity. What are critics saying? Organisations such as Liberty and the police monitoring group Netpol were quick to criticise the bill as a clampdown on the right to protest, handing too many discretionary powers to the Home Secretary and police. So some points of discussion. What rights can you think of that have been gained by protesting? I can name you two: the right of women to vote in the UK and racial equality in the USA, although that's written into law, it hasn't actually been fully used in practice yet, as we saw last year. Is protesting an important part of democracy? Why or why not? Is the right to protest a human right? What could happen if the government prevents protest? And why do you think some people don't like protests? Here are some other things to consider about protests. What it means for us as a democratic nation and where the boundaries should lie. At what point should a protest cross the line and become unlawful? How do our individual preferences affect our support or rejection of different protests? What if the suffragettes hadn't protested? Do we support Extinction Rebellion only up until the point when it personally inconveniences us? There aren't any easy answers. Here's a question. Is it right that protests should be limited once they get too large, too noisy or destructive? For example, when they remove and destroy statues of members of the slave trade in the UK. Plan an article for a local paper. Use this grid. Remember, you're using the Peel structure. You should plan 5 paragraphs, an introduction and a conclusion at the top and bottom, and 3 topic paragraphs in the middle, which are different aspects of your subject. Here is a 10-point plan for things that you need to do to write a good Paper 2 Question 5 answer on your views. Number 1. Plan all your paragraphs and arguments, including 1 or 2 counter-arguments. Use the Peel structure: point, evidence, explanation, and link or summary. Use the appropriate vocabulary, usually standard English, for your audience, and consider formality. Vary your sentences. Start with different types of words and vary the length and complexity. Use 1 or 2 minor sentences for impact. Use complex sentences to explain. Use signpost words and phrases. Use techniques such as alliteration, lists of 3, and rhyming to make it beautiful to read. Use rhetorical questions, direct address, and emotive language to make it persuasive. Use imagery such as metaphors and an appropriate semantic field to make your reader think. Include 1 or 2 semicolons to show off your punctuation skills, and check spelling, punctuation and grammar at the end. Here is a reminder of discourse markers or signpost words and phrases that you should be using when you write to add information and to, as well as, furthermore, to sequence events, firstly, secondly, meanwhile, finally, to show similarities, likewise, similarly, in the same way, to contrast, whereas, however, alternatively. Here are some more signpost words and phrases to emphasise, especially, particularly, above all, to show cause and effect, therefore, because, consequently, to conclude, in summary, overall, in conclusion, and to illustrate. For example, for instance, according to. Here is a selection of model sentences that you can use on the topic of homelessness, so not the topic that you're probably writing about today, but you can adapt these for your own purposes. So, contrast: while we sleep in our comfortable beds, safely within our secure homes, there is another world out there which literally begs us to listen. The question: when will we as a society learn that we need to do more to help the disadvantaged, the destitute and the diseased? Notice the alliteration in there. The dramatic sentence, tonight a homeless person near you will die. The trailer opening with 3 semicolons and a colon. We live in a world where there are people dying on the streets, where young adults starve for want of a warm meal, where old men collapse with hypothermia for the sake of a comfortable bed. Is this the world we want for our children? The for too long, and colon sentence. For too long we've ignored the pressing issue of the homelessness in our society. It's time that we as a community did something about it. Now more than ever. Now more than ever we need to ensure that those who lack the basic human rights of shelter and warmth are provided with hope and a better future. The I understand however sentence. I understand that there are people out there who claim that some homeless people are not genuine, however, can we afford to play with people's lives based on what we think are a minority? Here's a reminder of the lesson objectives: to discuss what protests mean for our liberty and democracy in the UK, to discuss the benefits and drawbacks of the new government bill to limit some aspect of protests, to revise 10 aspects of a good piece of persuasive writing, and to plan a piece of writing on learners' views of protests.